You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the first part of What If Deku Meets My Little Pony? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Demon Heart 12 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Discord sat on his throne as he laughed looking at the chaos around him. It was truly amazing, rabbits with long legs running in groups, flying pigs, floating homes, you name any act of chaos that you can think of, and Discord has done it. Chaos is refreshing to the soul. An amalgamation of creatures said while smiling. He had the head of a horse, one antler on the right side, a horn on his left side, the right arm of a lion, and the left arm of an eagle, his left leg was that of a goat while the right was that of a reptile. He also had the body of a snake, the wing of a bat, and also a Pegasus wing, and finally a dragon tail. He then filled a cup with soda coming from a cloud. He looked in the distance and saw 6 shadows approach. He sighed as he knew it was the troublesome ponies that he had defeated before coming for more. What do you want this time? Discord asked as he drank the glass and threw the solidified soda causing it to explode. The ponies looked at him, and said, "We're here to defeat you Discord, and send you back to your prison." He looked at them briefly, before laughing out loud. He looked at them again and realized that they were serious. He then said, "You want to defeat me, but with what? Friendship?" He then split his body into pieces as they rotated around them, and said, "Please, you can't. I destroyed your friendship once, and I can destroy it again." He then sat upon his throne as he said, "You know what? Might as well be done with it." He looked at them using his magic to grab their necklaces that contained the elements of harmony, his enemy. "Give me the hardest hit you have." The ponies then began to float in the air as they began to glow each with a different color. Discord looked at them and knew he was in trouble. At the time this happened, he was trapped in a stone statue never to be seen again. In a moment of what can be called desperation, he created another version of himself and used his power of chaos to slow time in his world, so his version could find a new where his body could inhabit someone, so he could escape this place, and preferably not be turned into stone once again. The version then looked at the slowed down time, and said, "I truly love this world." He then shrugged and said, "Well, it's time for exploration." The other version of Discord began to swim through the multiverse, trying to find a world where his standards are met, but also he can have some fun. He began looking through one after one, till one caught his attention. "Oh, let me see here." He looked at a world where people find weird creatures and train them. He was excited about it but frowned when he saw most relationships with those creatures are mostly forged through friendship. He stuck out his tongue as he said, "Next." He then began to continue flipping through worlds till he saw another one. It was really interesting. There were kids with monsters that somehow evolved, fused, merged, and many more with some sort of device. He was about to go and possess someone but stopped as he saw that this world was also plagued with friendship. He sighed as he said, "Another waste of potential." He then flicked through worlds and was beginning to get disappointed moment after moment. Every interesting world he came across was plagued by the same trouble he had in his world, friendship. He looked back at his world and saw that his legs were slowly turning into stone. He then began scrolling through the universes to find one that suited his standards, or at least his criteria. He then spotted a very interesting universe, one where creatures known as humans evolved powers similar to the ponies. While it wasn't magic, it sure was amazing. He was about to go possess the strongest person there just on principle but stopped him. Sure, he was a god, but too much power could cause the body to be destroyed. He then smiled as he found his perfect target. A small boy was sleeping peacefully, and he could feel that no power was emanating from him. So he then quickly latched onto the boy. He couldn't help but giggle as the boy began to fight him using whatever little well he had. Discord smiled as he said to the child in his mind, "Try as you wish, but in the end, your body is as good as mine." Then he felt his body growing weak by the second, his powers were being absorbed by the boy, and he was being sucked too. He looked back into his world and he saw a horrifying sight. The reason he was being weakened was due to his original self being petrified into rock. He screamed in despair, as he began to fade, "No, I was supposed to take control of you, not the opposite way around." The Lord of Chaos was then shoved into the child's subconscious as his original self was now sealed in stone. The child then began to giggle in his dream as his mother came into his room, and said, "Oh, Izuku, you're such a wonderful baby boy. I just hope you have a wonderful future ahead of you." "All men are not born equal" was a phrase Izuku learned the strong way. Ever since that day, he went to the quirk doctor. His dream was ruined and shattered into a million pieces. He frowned as the memory hit him. A young Izuku was bouncing up and down with his mother sitting beside him, and driving the car to the hospital. He was excited that he was going to get his quirk today. He looked at his mom and said, "Come on mommy, drive faster. I want to see what quirk I have." His mother smiled at his excitement, and said, "Calm down, Izuku. We're here." His mother said, as she stopped in front of the hospital, and stopped the car. The mother then proceeded to grab Izuku's hand and take him to see the quirk doctor. They both walked to a waiting room, and sat, or rather Inko sat while her son bounced around the room playing with other children. She didn't get to dwell on the details as the receptionist announced, "The Midoriya family, please enter the doctor's room." The family then entered the room, and went to the doctor who said, "Are you here to get your quirk checked?" The boy smiled as he nodded his head repeatedly. The doctor then pulled out a syringe, took a blood sample from Izuku, and also led the little boy to the X-ray room, and took his X-ray. The boy next to his mom as he jumped excitedly. The doctor then came into the room, and asked his mother, "Ma'am, what is your quirk exactly?" The woman blinked as she answered him, "Well, my quirk is a simple attraction quirk, while I can attract any small object. My husband's quirk is fire breathing." She then took a distressed look as she asked, "Why did you ask, doctor? Is there something wrong with my Izuku?" "Well, ma'am, you see, there are certain cases where quirks tend to skip a generation, or the quirk bloodline is so weak that the individual doesn't manifest at all." The doctor then proceeded to show the woman an X-ray of Izuku's left foot, and said, "You see, through version studies and research, we were able to find that children with no extra joint on their pinky toe will have a higher chance of manifesting a quirk, but..." He pointed at the boy's X-ray saying, "In this picture you can see that your son have this extra joint." Inko then asked, "What are you saying, doctor?" He then looked at her and said, "Your son won't have a quirk." The doctor then looked at Izuku and told him, "Sorry kid, but you won't be able to be a hero if you're thinking about that. Better start looking for new careers." Izuku then let go of his all-might figure, as the sad reality began to sink in. He looked at his mother who was distraught as he was, and asked the doctor, "Are you sure that he won't be able to manifest a quirk on his own?" "100% ma'am, but there is." The doctor stopped as he shook his head, "No, forget about that. You won't accept anyway." "What? What is it?" the woman asked with urgency in her voice. "Have you ever heard of a quirk stabilizer?" The doctor asked the woman who was now intrigued as to where the doctor was going at. She shook her head as a response. The doctor frowned as he thought that those things should be seriously taught in schools. "Are you sure, ma'am? I mean, they should have taught you that in school." But just like the previous time, the woman shook her head. "Anyway." The doctor massaged his temples as he said, "A quirk stabilizer is something that is usually found within quirkless people. It helps them accept quirks that are transferred to them from an outside quirk, and it can work on any quirk whether it was emitter, transformation, or mutant. The woman clapped her hands as she said, "Now, that's extremely wonderful. So how can we do it?" She knew there must be a catch to such a thing. Well, the catch is that the procedure to enact this is a seriously dangerous operation where the individual is put through version treatments, before a certain quirk factor is entered into his bloodstream, mixing with his own, and making a new mutation of the quirk that was introduced. The man said with a wobbly smile, but then added, "But as a bounce, we know that the endgame of this is that the individual will gain a quirk." The mother felt panic traveling through her body as she hugged her son, and said, "And what is the danger level of this operation if I may ask?" Perhaps if the chances of its success were high enough then she would allow Izuku to undergo it, and gain a quirk. The doctor scratched the back of his head, and said, "Well, out of 1,000 people who had it, only 10 people were reported to have it succeed or go through it without having any permanent side effects that would cause them to hate to be alive as a whole." The mother paled as she imagined her son going through painful treatments, and a dangerous quirk implant procedure only to receive nothing but pain in the end or death. The woman then looked at her son's face which was full of hope that he may have a quirk, and be able to fulfill his dream of being a hero. She looked at the doctor with guilt filling her insides. She thought about Izuku's dreams as she told herself that if Izuku ever asked her if he could be a hero she would say that he would become one regardless of a quirk or not. "No thank you, doctor. I won't risk my Izuku's life in an operation where success isn't 100%. She then stood up as the doctor said, "I understand ma'am, but if you ever think about it, call me, I can pull a few favors from the medical community." The woman nodded as she exited the room pulling a nearly catatonic Izuku after her. The ride to their home was silent, but she hoped that Izuku would understand one day that what she did there was for his best. When they arrived, she said to Izuku, "Sweetie, dinner will be ready in 30 minutes. How about you go to your room, and watch some hero videos while I finish it?" The boy nodded numbly as he walked up to his room. The mother frowned as she couldn't fault him for his state right now. People in today's society looked down on quirkless people, treating them less than dirt. She could only imagine what kind of pain and heartbreak her son was going through, but she was determined to help him through it and do what any mother would. When she finished the dinner, she shouted, "Izuku, dinner's ready." She waited for a bit, but nothing came from her son. She then shouted again, "Izuku, dinner's ready." Again nothing, but silence. She walked up to his room, only to see the boy sitting in front of the computer screen crying his eyes out. The boy sat watching his favorite All-Might video. He then slowly turned his chair to face her as he asked, "Mom, do you think I can still be a hero?" The mother looked at her son and was about to say, "Yes," but she stopped. She knew that heroes died every day, and they were with quirks. Sure, some heroes fought quirkless, but they still had something up her sleeve to aid them. She then began to imagine her son dying because he became a hero fighting people who were stronger than he was. She then came down beside her son, remembering the promise that she said to herself during the doctor's appointment that she would protect his dreams no matter what, but it was easier said than done. She couldn't just offer her son to death just to let him follow a very strong dream. The boy looked at her with hope in his eyes, as he knew that his mother would believe in his dreams no matter what. The mother then hugged him as she cried herself, saying, "I'm sorry, Izuku." Izuku just sat there silently as he said in his head, "Mom, this isn't what I wanted to hear." Both the mother and son duo continued to cry till Izuku cried himself to sleep, but during his sleep, he had a weird dream. He saw a weird creature that was a bunch of mixed creatures. The creature looked at him and slapped his forehead as he said, "Get a grip on yourself. You don't need this quirk thing as long as you have the element of chaos on your side." The boy then woke from his sleep as he was breathing heavily. His day was terrible, and he just had a very weird dream. He only hoped tomorrow would be better, but something told him it wouldn't. The next day came, and Izuku's mom was packing his stuff to take him to school. She only hoped her son wouldn't have a strong time there, but she was sure that with his best friend there he wouldn't have too much of a bad time there. She walked up to his room and knocked on his door saying, "Izuku, come on. It's time to go to school." She waited for a moment before she knocked again, but got no answer. The mother then opened the door only to see her son sitting in the corner of the room hugging his knees, and still in his pajamas. The woman frowned as she said, "Come on, Izuku, don't be like that." The boy looked at her and said, "But I don't want to go to school. Everyone is going to make fun of me." The woman then smiled as she said, "Izuku, would All Might be afraid of people making fun of him?" She then saw the boy start thinking, as he tried to come to a solution for his situation. He finally sighed as he said, "No, mommy." "Good, so let's pack your stuff so we can go to school." The boy sighed as he nodded his head. At the school, Izuku sat alone with himself, as he contemplated whether he should tell his friends that he is quirkless. He knew that Kaken would help him, but at the same time, his best friend had recently become more aggressive toward him. He sighed as he couldn't think of anything. He then saw someone approach him. He looked only to see an ashen blonde-haired boy. He had crimson red eyes and was popping small explosions from his hands. This was Kaken, better known as Katsuki Bakugo. The boy smiled at Izuku as he said, "So, Izuku, what is your quirk?" Izuku froze as he tried to think of a way to avoid this, but gulped as he knew that his best friend was going to find out either sooner or later, so he said in a very quiet voice, "I'm quirkless." The other boy frowned as he couldn't hear what Izuku said. He then said, "Speak, Izuku, I can't hear you." The boy then said, "I'm quirkless." Katsuki then stood there dumbfounded. Quirkless means he doesn't have a quirk, so he's weak, pathetic, and useless. So he asked, "So you're quirkless?" The green-haired boy then said, "Yes, I'm quirkless, but don't worry, I'm still going to be a hero like we promised." He was cut off as the other boy laughed at him. Izuku looked at him, and said, "Kaken, why are you laughing at me?" The blonde-haired boy then said, "You want to be a hero. You're quirkless. You're nothing, but a Deku. You can never be a hero." Izuku looked at him, and said, "What about our promise, Kaken?" The boy looked at him with a sneer, "You're truly worthless Deku, and you think that you can be a hero. That's never going to happen, do you know why?" The smaller boy shook his head as the bigger one popped an explosion in his face as he said, "Because you're quirkless, and quirkless people are nothing." "But I can be the first quirkless hero," Izuku said, but was startled by an explosion in the face as he looked at the boy. The boy then scoffed. Katsuki then said, "Keep dreaming. You'll never be a hero, and if you ever did you'll be nothing but a failure." The boy walked away but stopped as he turned again to Izuku, and said, "From now on, you'll be known as Deku. A name worthy of a failure like you." As the boy left Izuku behind, Izuku couldn't help but feel betrayed at how easily his best friend left him behind. He looked at his friend, and said, "I'll show them. I'll become a hero just like All Might." From that day forward, Izuku's life took a turn for the worse as everyone began to bully him. He would usually return to his home with bruises, cuts, and scraps, but he never told his mom to not worry about him. One day, he went to the park to play and saw something that he couldn't stand for. He saw Bakugo bullying a child, went up to him, and said, "Kaken, why are bullying him?" The blonde boy then said, "Move aside, Deku. This is between me and this extra." He thought he could say that my quirk isn't that impressive so he must pay. Although they weren't friends anymore, Bakugo didn't harass Izuku like the others, he merely stuck to calling him names and allowing him to still follow him, but even that was revoked when Izuku tried to help him from the river. "But you can't just hurt him, Kaken. That's just wrong," Izuku said as he still stood between both boys. Bakugo and his two cronies who were with him began to grow very agitated. Bakugo then said, "Move aside, Deku. No, I won't let you hurt him. Heroes don't hurt other people." The blonde boy smiled evilly as he slammed his fist into his hand, causing a small pop sound to appear. He then looked at Izuku, and said, "So you're planning to play hero, Deku. The boy then looked at him with an evil stare. Since you won't budge, why don't you fight us instead of this extra? Izuku didn't have much time to think as the three rushed him, and began to beat him up, and by the end of it, he was left covered in burns. And as if to add insult to his injury, the boy that he helped days later began to bully him too in order to avoid being bullied himself. Wonderful, just wonderful. In addition, after that day, Bakugou began to join his beating, as he would train his quirk on him. It was painful, but he wouldn't let that stop him from being a hero, so the boy began to indulge in hero quirk analysis. He was able to dissect any quirk he came across, and he wrote down his notes in a notebook he always carried around with him. But one day during school something happened with Izuku. Although it wasn't something he would take a lot of notice to back then, it set a path for the future. It was a normal day at lunch, or at least as normal as it is for Izuku. He was sitting alone in the cafeteria eating his lunch as quietly as possible to avoid a second beating after his morning beating from Bakugou. For some reason, his mother still thinks that they are best friends, and he couldn't bring himself to tell her that he was bullying her because she saw Bakugou as another son of hers. Also, add to that, Izuku seemed to still think of Bakugou as a friend himself, and even Izuku just didn't want to ruin his mother's friendship with Bakugou's mom. He then picked up a glass cup of water and began to drink it as he looked at his surroundings. He saw that Bakugou just entered the cafeteria, and began to pray to whatever entity out there that was hearing him that he wouldn't notice him, but to his surprise, Bakugou didn't come in his direction but instead was caught in the middle of a fight with another student. This by itself caused a huge food fight inside the place. The boy was lucky that he quickly hid under the table so he wouldn't be caught in the middle of the fire. But he sat under the table. He felt something weird with his body. It felt like some kind of energy, but he attributed it to his adrenaline and fear of being bullied. He then looked at the cup he was holding have turned from glass to plastic. He looked at it with an odd look as he asked himself, I swear you were just glass a moment ago. He then began to scratch his head in confusion but shrugged as he returned to his lunch. He only popped his head when the principal came in and left, given that if he saw him he would with no doubt try to pin it on him. However, Izuku just couldn't get this incident out of his mind, as it wasn't the first time it happened. He can remember other times from his childhood when he had objects only for them to disappear, change their state, begin floating away, or change their size slightly. When he usually told his mother, she usually attributed that to his imagination. He frowned as he walked to his class, and began to take notes about the new lesson he was having. However, deep in the subconscious, a voice yelled with desperation, "For the love of chaos, how can you be so smart yet so dumb at the same time? Geez kid, I honestly thought you would realize that you have my powers by now. But I'll give him a break, he can't harvest chaos as I did. Everything will happen in due time." He then looked at the clock as he said again, "I hope I can get freed soon enough. It's torture being here." A couple of years went by, and even with his counterpart's recent release from his stone prison, discord was still trapped within Izuku's subconscious. He sighed as he said, "Even though my original self is free now, I still can't emerge given that my powers merged with his body, and are a part of him now. Heck, even I'm part of him now." He frowned as he realized that he was bumped down into an overrated training manual. He then looked through Izuku's eyes and saw something that made him yawn, "School again. Even though I'm stuck here, and barely able to do anything and I'm bored, so how about the one how he to do the actual work?" He then saw the teacher enter, and the boy was so invested in his hero analysis for the future, that his words were actually forming in midair. This earned Izuku in real life a yell from Bakugou, "Shut the hell up nerd, I don't want to hear you speaking anymore." The boy flinched as he recoiled on himself as the entire class laughed at him as he nodded his head, and said, "Yes. Kaken." Bakugou then yelled at him saying, "You DMN shitty nerd, how many times do I have to tell you to never call me by that name ever again?" The smaller boy then slapped his hands over his mouth so he wouldn't make the already bad situation even worse than it already was. The teacher then said, "Midoriya, stop disturbing the class and stop picking a fight with Bakugou, or else you'll get detention today." The boy lowered his head as he said, "Sorry, sensei." The teacher then sneered at the boy as he said, "Don't let it happen again, got it?" The teacher then stood, and said, "In other words, let's begin today's lesson. But before we begin that." He then put a bunch of papers in front of his table as he continued, "Let's talk about your future careers." The students looked at him in silence, and he then threw the papers in the air as he said, "But how am I kidding? I know that you all want to be heroes." The students began to cheer as they used their quirks, but only 2 students were quiet the entire time, and one of them was Izuku as he didn't have any quirk to use in the first place. A voice then boomed through the entire classroom as Bakugo stood up and declared loudly for everyone to hear him, "Teacher, don't lump in with these losers. I'm going to be the next number hero and have all the power, money, and power. I'm going to be the best of the best." He then looked at his classmates and said, "Those losers will be lucky if they even manage to become some low-class hero who can't even hold their salt's worth." The other students began to yell at Bakugo. "What are you saying, Bakugo? Yeah, you're so full of yourself. Yeah, you can't just disregard us like this." Bakugo then yelled, "Shut up, you stupid idiots. I'm going to UA, while you will go to some second-rate hero school." The students then began to gasp as whispers began to emerge through the entire class talking about Bakugo's declaration. UA. No way, that's too strong to try to. Yeah, I heard that their entrance rate is about 2%. Man, it's just 2DMN strong. Bakugo then laughed as he said, "Yeah, I'm going to UA, the only school that will expect the future number hero to graduate from." He then stood on the table as he posed saying, "I aced the preliminary exams, and going to enter UA, and become the next number 1 hero." The teacher then looked at Izuku and smiled wickedly. He then lifted a paper as he said, "Midoriya, didn't you sign up to UA too?" Bakugo then froze as he looked at Izuku, and the entire class began to laugh at the green-haired boy who tried to melt into the ground. "Deku signed up for UA. Are you insane? You're quirkless. What do you expect to do? Are seriously thinking you're going to be a hero?" While all the other students began to laugh at Izuku, the boy lowered his head in sadness as this wasn't the first time his dreams were made fun of. He was also sure this wouldn't be the last time either. However, he was determined to become the first quirkless hero and prove to everyone that you don't need a quirk to actually be a hero. He was going as symbol just like All Might. While Izuku was thinking about his dream, Bakugo looked at him with an angry expression. So the loud blonde yelled, "Deku, you BSTRD, what do you think you're doing to UA? Are trying to compete with me? Quirkless losers aren't even allowed to enter the exams." The green-haired boy gulped knowing that if he gave the wrong answer, he would eventually get hurt, so trying to tread the waters carefully, he said, "What? No Kaken, I won't ever compete with you. I'm just following my dream like I always wanted to." Plus, they removed that rule from UA about banning quirkless people from joining the entrance exam. The blonde didn't seem to take this lightly as he thought this was some kind of declaration of war, so he yelled, "Deku, are you looking down on me? You think you can be a hero, hell you can't even be a clown." The boy then slammed his hand making an explosion on Izuku's desk saying, "Don't even think about showing up to the entrance exam." Katsuki was about to do more, but he stopped when the teacher said, "Bakugo, stop. I have a class to finish." The blonde boy then backed away, as Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. But he looked at Bakugo whose eyes said that this wasn't over, not by a fat chance. The green-haired boy then looked at the board and sighed hoping to avoid any further problems. Back in Izuku's head, discord slapped his head. Ever since he was able to retain his ability to think, he was always tired of that infuriating sight of Bakugo beating his technical host. He saw this case way too many times. The bell will ring, Bakugo will attack the boy, and the boy will run home crying about how he's going to prove he is a hero. "Come kid, work with me here. All you have to do is focus on all the chaotic energy around, and you'll be able to use." The former Lord of Chaos then tipped his chin as he said, well, to some extent at least, but sitting and doing nothing won't help. He actually didn't like the way that the boy just sat and wished to be a hero, and didn't put some work into it. At least when he was the Lord of Chaos, he actually worked strong to destroy his enemies. It might have not been the best example for this case, but still, it worked. As the bell rang, Discord then lifted his hands, and opened them dramatically as he said, "Oh goody." He looked as he saw Bakugou stand in front of the door, and added, "Another beatdown to add to this never-ending list." As Izuku began to pack his stuff, he looked only to see Bakugou coming his way, and his goons following him. This alone set several warning signs across his head, as he asked, "Kaken, what do you want?" "I want you to pull out your application to UA," the boy demanded as clearly as day. "What, but it's my dream to go to UA," the green-haired boy said. It's then that Bakugou took a deep breath, and explained, "You know that great heroes always show signs of greatest from their childhood. And I'm one of them, so hear me good, and hear me well. You're going to pull out that application because I'm the only one from this backwater school who's going to make it into UA." The blonde boy finished explaining as he grabbed Izuku's shirt and threw him to the side of the room. To him, Izuku was worthless. The nerd going to UA would tarnish the reputation of his school. Not that he gave a SHT, but if the school's reputation is tarnished, is trashed, then so is his. Izuku didn't know what to say, but he suddenly felt someone take his hero notebook from his bag, and looked to see Bakugou's cronies holding his work as he mocked him. "What is this?" "A diary." Bakugou then took the book, and looked at it as he read, "Hero Analysis for the Future." He then looked at Izuku, and said, "So you still didn't finish this creepy stalker habit of yours?" He then added, "And how many times do I have to tell you that you won't ever be a hero?" He said as he torched Izuku's notebook in explosions, causing the boy's eyes to widen as he saw his work all go to scrap while the blonde boy threw it to the fish down in the pond. The bullies then began to walk away, but Bakugou stopped as he turned to Izuku, and said, "If you want a quirk that badly, I think there is a way." Izuku looked at him with hopeful eyes, but it didn't last for long as Katsuki spat out the following, "Go, and take a swan dive, and pray to have a quirk in the next life." He then began laughing as he finally left, leaving Izuku to his thoughts. Minutes later, the young boy was walking with his notebook in his hand as he said, "Stupid Kaken, what if I actually did it? How would he then be a hero?" The boy was busy talking to himself. He didn't notice a sludge-looking thing emerging from the sewers until it was too late. The thing then grabbed onto him, and he said, "You're my hero, kid. Now, stand still, it won't hurt a lot. It's only 45 seconds and you won't feel anything anymore." Izuku, refusing to do, asked himself as he struggled trying to free himself, "Is this how I die? But I didn't even become a hero." As the lack of oxygen began to cause him to black out, he could barely make out a new presence appearing, and then everything went black. Izuku then woke up as he felt someone smacking him repeatedly on the cheeks. He groggily opened his eyes only to be greeted by a huge man. He wore a white tank top and green pants. But what was most striking about him was his blonde hair, which had two protrusions standing upward in a V shape. He was the symbol of peace, All Might. The boy marveled at the sight as he screamed, "All Might." He then began to bow repetitively as the blonde hero laughed. But deep within Izuku, the Lord of Chaos pulled out his tongue, and said, "You're lame." This act began to send out signals to the outside world that began to make the hero uncomfortable with the boy. But he had to endure it. The boy then went to grab his notebook wanting to have an autograph, only to be shocked that it was already signed, thanking the hero as he did so. The hero then attempted to jump to get away from the boy, but Izuku latched on to his feet. After some time, the hero landed on a building. As he looked at the boy and scolded him, "Young man, I'll let you know that was very reckless of you." The boy looked down in shame, as he said, "I know, but I have a lot of questions to ask. Please just hear out for a little bit." The hero then felt his limit nearing its end, so he said, "Quickly, young Midoriya, right?" The boy then nodded his head. The boy as he asked, "Do you think that a quirkless person can become a hero?" he said as he bowed down with tears in his eyes. The hero was just there as he echoed lightly, "Quirkless, you say?" However, steam begins to erupt from him. Izuku, not noticing the hero's condition, then said, "Yes, I want to be a hero just like you. A hero who chases away bad guys with a smile." He then looked up only to see smoke emitting from a skinny blonde man, so the boy promptly yelled, "Where's All Might?" "Are you a villain?" the boy said as he backed away. The hero just sighed and shook his head as he said, "Boy, I'm All Might." He then spat out BLD. After one long explanation, Izuku understood that All Might had a fight with a very strong villain 5 years ago that left him in this state after he received an injury that destroyed most of his insides. The hero then looked at the boy, and said, "And as for your question, no, I don't think a quirkless person can be a hero. A hero must always be ready to put his life on the line. But don't feel bad, you can always be a cop. It's a fine profession. It's okay to dream, but be realistic." The hero then walked down the stairs as he closed the door of the roof of the building, leaving the boy staring into nothing as he felt his dreams get crushed. The boy then walked alone with his dreams broken, but he then heard a loud explosion. The boy went to the site of the sound. He then saw the villain that his idol caught trying to take someone hostage, with several heroes not attempting to do anything because they don't have the right quirk. The boy then saw the hostage. It was Kaken. He then realized that the villain must escape from All Might when he latched onto him. He then ran with several heroes trying to stop him. He was lost, as he saw the chaos around him. He then saw something odd, some kind of waves in the air. He then grasped it and began to pull it towards him. Katsuki was not having a good day. He was being taken hostage by this shitty villain. He looked only to see Deku trying to save him. The boy then felt something begin to pull him, or he was rather feeling funny. For one moment the villain was holding the nest. He was beside Death Arms, one of the heroes on the scene. He looked only to see Deku focusing on the villain keeping in place. One question popped up as he asked himself, does Deku have a quirk? Izuku didn't know what he was doing, but he was doing it. First, he somehow managed to remove Kaken safely from the villain. Then he used telekinesis perhaps to stop the villain. He was struggling though, the heroes were just standing there not doing anything. Moments later, All Might appeared and defeated the villain. Izuku then fell on his butt, as he asked himself, what just happened? Izuku looked around in confusion, unable to understand what he had just done. Did he manifest a quirk out of the air? No, that was impossible. The doctor told him he will never manifest a quirk, or maybe he did have one, but the doctor lied to put him in a quirk surgery for a quick buck. It was all confusing. He then looked around him, and it was utter pandemonium. He then saw All Might talking with the press about the sludge villain. Inside him, discord slapped his forehead as he said, "Well, I guess I have to talk to him tonight to explain what actually happened, or else he won't be able to use it ever again." Izuku then was suddenly pulled to the side by the heroes who began scolding him. It was first Death Arms who said, "What were you thinking, kid? You could have got hurt or worse." The hero then shook the boy as Kamui Woods came and said, Now, no need to be so violent. I saw it on the boy's face, he was just panicked when he saw his friend in danger and helped him using his quirk. He didn't mean any harm." The wood hero then came closer and whispered to Izuku, "If you want, I'll take in my agency for an internship when it's due time." Death Arms who heard that then yelled, "Hey, don't try and take him for yourself. I saw him first." The two heroes then began to bicker back and forth as Izuku still tried to understand what happened. Two heroes were fighting over him because he has a quirk. That was rather refreshing, to say the least, but he was approached by Backdraft who gave him his hero card, and told him, "See you in the internships." This was seen by the two bickering heroes who yelled at the water hero, "Hey, get your own intern." The two then managed to SCK the water hero in their mini-brawl as they all discussed loudly who have the right to take Izuku under his wing but couldn't come to an agreement. On the side, Katsuki Bakugo was being tended to by a couple of pros, and some medics checking if he was fine, but what irked him the most was Deku. The nerd had a quirk but never bothered to tell him. Was he looking down on him the entire time? Did the nerd think he was so grand that he didn't need to tell him that he had a quirk? Did the nerd think he was so strong that he thought that he never had to use it against Bakugo or show it to him? But no, Deku was quirkless. He always was, and always will be, but what happened? He then looked at Deku, who looked just as confused as he was. He couldn't tell if he was being genuine or not, but Katsuki needed to correct something. He then saw the green-haired boy slowly stand up, and walk away with confusion written all over his face, while the shitty heroes were still arguing over how we'll get the nerd for an internship. He then got up and followed the nerd to tell him something. Izuku started walking home with a million questions on his mind, as he thought about what happened today. I just manifested a quirk, but how? I'm sure a late bloomer is usually about 6 or 8 years at max, and if we can stretch it by a miracle then 10 years old. But is this a quirk, or is it something else? The feeling I got was odd. It was like I can see a disturbance in the ether, but what was that? The boy never saw someone walking behind till the figure yelled, "Hey, Deku." The boy then turned around, fear itched on his face as he looked at Bakugo, who was wearing the face of the devil as an expression. Do you want anything, Kaken? Zip it, nerd, the boy shouted, causing the smaller one to salute him like a soldier and stand still waiting to hear what the other one had to say. Listen here, you filthy piece of garbage. I didn't need your help today. Got it? I was saved by All Might, not you. The boy then began to walk forward, but stopped and said something, and don't you dare start looking down on me just causing you to have a quirk, got it? The boy then began to quickly nod his head as Bakugo then walked away saying, shitty Deku. Izuku then sighed as he said, he's right. I didn't need to help him today. I was just getting in the way. I guess I need to look. The boy didn't get to finish his sentence as a huge figure appeared from the alleyway skidding to a stop. He said, I am here. The boy was then startled out of his mind as the hero stood in front of him, causing him to yell, what are you doing here? I thought you were still stuck with the press. The blonde hero then began to laugh at him as he said, my child, I represent justice, not sound bites. Do you know why? That's because I am all Mig. Belg. The hero then spat BLD as he puffed back into his mini-form as Izuku became to call it Small Might. The terrified boy then said, are you alright, All Might? Was he still sad that All Might causally steamrolled all over his dreams without giving it a second glance? Sure. Did he feel angry toward the hero? Well, he would be lying if he said no, but he understood where the hero was coming from. He only wanted to protect him, and if he didn't jump on All Might, the villain today would have never escaped from the hero. So then the boy bowed down and said, I'm sorry, All Might, if I didn't hang on to you, the villain would have never escaped. The hero then looked at him, and said, my boy, first I'm fine, and... The hero then adjusted his stand as he continued, second I came here to apologize. The stood there dumbfounded for a moment, not believing what he just heard. All Might was apologizing to him, but why? He then said, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? The hero then smiled and said again, I came here to apologize to you, my boy. The boy then looked at him as he said, but why? I mean it was because of me that the villain managed to escape from you. I should be apologizing. The hero then said, while that is true, it was you today who was a true hero. If it weren't for your actions to save your friend, I would have been only an inflated balloon of muscles that can't even live up to his own ideals, and for that my boy I give you my thanks. The boy then blushed heavily as his hero was thanking him, so he said, it was no trouble, All Might, but I still feel bad about today. I got in your way, and caused other heroes trouble. I wish I just wasn't that useless. The boy knew that he had a quirk now, but what good can it do if he didn't have the body to support it, or didn't have any idea about it? On the contrary, my boy today, you were the personification of heroism. The man then smiled as she said, you, a quirkless rose to the occasion while us pros were only standing in the background not knowing what to do. It was because of your actions that I was able to extend my buff form a little to save the day. He then looked at the boy, and said, tell me, when you rescued your friend what happened? I don't know honestly. At first, I was watching, but then I felt my feet were walking on his own. And after that, it was just a blur. I honestly don't what I have even done after that. The hero's smile then widened as he said, you know that all the stories of the greatest heroes begin with a similar thing. They all say that their legs just walked on their own. The hero then pointed his finger at Izuku, and said, you, young man can also become a hero. The green-haired boy then fell to the ground as he cried his eyes out, finally having someone believe in his dreams. It was none other than his all-time favorite hero, All Might. It was really exciting to see the symbol of peace himself tell him that he can also be a hero. But then the hero added, and I also came here to give you an offer. The boy's ear then perked up. What is that offer that All Might was talking about? But, first before I tell you, I recall that you told me that you were quirkless, so what happened today? Izuku himself didn't know what to answer. He was still in shock from what happened before, and what is happening. He looked at his hand, and then looked at a trash can lid. He tried to move it and succeeded a little in lifting it, before becoming exhausted and letting it fall. Inside him, Discord yelled, what the heck was that? You have enough chaos energy in this world to last you for a decade. You're embarrassing me. The Lord then sat down, and sighed, conjuring a to-do list, and putting on it long talk with the boy when he sleeps. Izuku then looked at Small Might and said, I don't know. For most of my life, I've been quirkless. He then began remembering small incidents such as glass turning into plastic, water moving around him, air solidifying in his hand, and snow turning into metal, but his mother always turned him down, telling him it was his imagination or some weird coincidence. There were some weird moments in my life where I thought I had a quirk, but my mom always said that it was just coincidence. He then began telling the hero what happened to him, greatly interesting the hero. Well, young Midoriya, I can't say I ever heard of such a quirk, but I can say that it is a strong one. Maybe, yours required some kind of forced activation. It happened to some people around the world. The hero then shook his head, and said, we'll talk about that later. But now, like I said before, I had an offer to you. Izuku then looked at him and nodded his head. All Might then said, young Midoriya, I want you to be my successor. An eerie silence then stretched as both looked at each other, Izuku clearly not understanding what was happening, while All Might just looked at him, waiting for the young boy to process what he just heard. He can't actually blame the boy for his reaction, he had the same one when he met his MSTR. Sensing that the awkward silence stretched good enough, the hero coughed in his fist as he said, my boy, I understand that this might be a little overwhelming, but I think you're doing it a little. The boy then shook his head as he said, I'm sorry, All Might, but it's just a little bit shocking that you want me as a successor. I mean, why me, while there are people with better quirks out there? Inside his head, Discord stuck out his tongue saying, chaos is way better than quirks. All Might then nodded his head as he said, I can see where you're coming from, but after saying your actions today, I deemed you worthy of becoming my successor and having my quirk. Another eerie silence stretched, as All Might sighed again, but Izuku snapped out of it as he said, you want me to take your quirk? Is that even possible? The hero smiled as he said, yes, I want you to take my quirk. He then asked the boy, do you know what my quirk is? Izuku then put his fingers on his chin as he said, most people believe that it's some type of strength enhancement or augmentation type quirk. The hero smiled, well, that's not true. You see, anytime anybody asks or talks about my quirk on TV shows, I either crack a joke or change the subject entirely. My quirk is a special one. It's called One for All. Izuku looked at him with admiration as he echoed the words All Might said. The hero then continued explaining his quirk as his hand began to glow. It's a quirk that can be passed down from generation to generation, each generation strengthening even further. The hero then looked at the boy who was going into some sort of mumbling spree. A quirk that can be passed down to others, that's practically unheard of, but this doesn't mean that it's impossible. The hero then said, "You kinda overthinking it." The hero then saw the boy continuing his spree, causing the hero to scream, "Stop nerding out." The boy then snapped out of it as he looked at the hero, and said while rubbing the back of his head, "Sorry." The hero then smiled, "No problem, it's overwhelming if you think about it." He then asked him again, "Do you want my awesome power or not?" The boy was about to say, yes, but inside him, Discord's mind was running 100 miles an hour. He was afraid that the combination of those two powers will practically overwhelm the boy and destroy him. He then yelled, "Don't accept it. You'll die." The boy then flinched as he heard the voice, so he subconsciously said, "Am I hearing stuff?" Discord was shocked that the boy can hear him, but said, "No, you idiot, you're not going crazy, but that's a talk for a later time. Don't take the offer, or else you'll die." Izuku didn't know what to do anymore since he was being offered an awesome power, but he listened to the voice in his head as he said, "I'm sorry, All Might, but no, I can't take it." No, he's. All Might stopped a little because he thought he heard the boy say, "No," so he said quietly, "Can you repeat that, my boy?" Izuku sighed. He was his hero offering him his power, but he couldn't take it. He didn't know why he listened in the first place, but something told him it would for the best if he listened to the voice in his head. He then repeated what he said, "I'm sorry, but I can't take it." The hero was shocked. He imagined that the boy will jump at the possibility of having his power, but he refused. The hero respected his decision, but he needed to know why he refused, so he asked, "Tell me, my boy, why did you refuse to take my power? I'm sure that if you have it, you could in the top of the rankings with no problem when you become a pro, aside from becoming the new symbol of peace." The boy looked at him as he contemplated an answer, but a question suddenly popped into his head. Did he really want his hero's quirk? All his life he wanted a quirk, but now he has one, so why take another? He looked at his hero and said, "I know it may shock that I refused, but all my life I wanted nothing, but to have a power of my own, and now I have one, so it feels wrong to take your power knowing that out there is someone with my same condition or at least a weak quirk who wants to be a hero, so sorry but I can't take it." All Might smiled at the young man. He truly deserved one for all, but he respected his decision. The hero then buffed up as he said, "All right young man, have it your way, but still with or with my quirk, your body needs training. I mean look at you, you look like a string bean. So tomorrow morning at 6 meet me at the beach, so we can start training, and see what this quirk of yours is all about." Izuku nodded his head as he walked home with the hero watching him. As he returned to his small form, he said, "Good kid." He then looked at his hand, "I'll look for about 3 more weeks, and if I don't find someone worthy I'll go with Sir's choice." He then chuckled a little saying, "Maybe that will get him to talk to me again." The hero then buffed up again and jumped into the sky as he looked for a successor to give his power, not knowing he will meet him sooner than he expects. Izuku just returned home as he thought about today's events. It was truly mind-tiring what happened today. First, his ex-best friend tells him to kill himself. He was almost killed by a villain. He meets All Might. The hero crushes his dream. He then saves Bakugou by suddenly manifesting a quirk, and to top it all off his hero offered him his power, but he refused today. He could say that today was among the 10 weirdest days of his life, if not the first. And the cherry on the cake, he might be going crazy because he was hearing voices in his head. The entity of chaos then slaps its forehead as it yells inside his head, "You're not going crazy. I'm as real as they get." Apparently, this had the desired effect as Izuku crouched to the floor as he said in his mind, "Geez, I get it sensitive much." He was shocked by the way he spoke to this voice, but he was cut from his thoughts when his mother came and hugged him crying, "Izuku, are you okay sweetie? I saw you crouching on the floor. Are you sick? Do you need medicine?" Should I make some of Nana's old sickness soup? The green-haired boy cringed when that was mentioned. Since he tasted it, he passed out. No, I'm fine mom, but seriously no need for the soup. The boy said with a serious expression. He then softened his face as he said in a happy voice, in other news, I have a quirk. The woman froze. Her mind couldn't comprehend what she just heard. Her son had a quirk, but the doctor said it was practically impossible for him to form it naturally. Did her son join some weird government experiment so he can finally have a quirk? She imagined her son getting impaled by needles with tubes connected throughout his body, so she began to cry, Izuku, did you join some weird government experiment? Please don't say you did that, Izuku. The boy barely managed to move his mom away from him as he heard laughter in his head, so he said, No mom, I didn't take it from government experiments. He then waited for her to calm down as he said, First, you seriously need to calm down mom. Second, stop watching those conspiracy governments movies, they're messing with your head. He said as he pointed to a metal cap by the side of the TV making her feel embarrassed. Lastly, I've manifested it naturally. Really? The mother asked, unsure how to accept this new information. Yeah, so what do you have for dinner? Izuku asked. The woman wanted to press further to know how it manifested, but saw her hungry son, and said, Kutsuden. The boy then quickly filled a bowl and watched the news that covered today's most important news. Opening the TV, it showed the following, we just had the following, All Might managed to take down a villain made out of slime after said villain took a school kid hostage. Another kid walked into the scene and teleported the kid to safety, and then held the villain till All Might took care of him. It then showed Izuku fighting the villain, before the hero subdued him. Izuku. He then turned to his mom with a shocked expression. She then yelled, My baby. The woman then lunged at him and hugged him, breaking a couple of bones with the process as the boy tried to explain to her that he was just fine. After a lot of explaining, and a lot of crying on Inko's end, Izuku finally managed to convince his mom that he was dandy fine, and explained how he got his powers. His mom was just glad that he was okay. The boy after a day of excitement went to sleep, but he finally fell asleep. Another chapter of this weird day unfolded. The boy then woke up to an empty void in which he floated into, but then heard a voice say, I finally get to meet you after all these years. The boy then turned and was met by a goat thing. He wasn't too sure since the creature was an abomination which made Nizu's species look easy. But then the figure said, You mean that possum mouse hero wannabe? The boy was shocked the figure can hear his thoughts, but the figure then answered, Of course, I can hear your thoughts. I am in your mind after all. The boy looked around. This was his mind. He honestly thought it would look more different, at least a little bit organized, not an empty void. Stop whining. I'm here to introduce myself, and you keep asking questions. It's distracting, to say the least. The figure said. Sorry, Izuku said before asking, and you are? Come on, kid. You know me. I always visit you in your dreams. The figure answered. Izuku then raked his brain as he suddenly remembered how the figure was and said, You're that guy I always see in my dreams. Yes, that's me, he said as his thumbs, which were a loin claw, and an eagle's talon, popped out and pointed at the figure, who then formally introduced himself, I'm Discord, the Lord of Chaos. The boy looked at him confused and asked, So you're like my quirk? Discord then shrugged, Call me your quirk, guidance counsel, mentor, whatever suits your fancy, I don't care honestly. This shocked Izuku. If this wasn't his quirk, then what was he? Was this some kind of a mental quirk he was hit with? Was this some kind of hypnosis? Was this? Discord then conjured a megaphone as he yelled at the boy, Still in your mind, kid. Stop with the blabbering. You're annoying me. Izuku then felt the vibrations go through as his head began to hurt, causing him to fall through the endless void. He then saw Discord gliding beside him, and asking him, Want a hand? Yes, please. The Lord of Chaos then grabbed him and helped him refocus, as the boy asked while rubbing his head, "If you aren't my quirk, then what are you?" The ex-villain smiled as he said, "It's story time." He then conjured a DVD player and a small projector as he said, "Watch closely. You might learn something from this small presentation." He then summoned a DVD and put it in the player, and a video began. The video showed Discord, who was a villain for the lack of a better term. It showed how he loved to play with chaos. It then showed how he went to the pony world and began to rule it with an iron fist using chaos. It then showed how he was originally defeated by the elements of harmony. It went to his eventual escape from his rocky prison, how fought the 6 ponies turning them against each other, and finally his last-ditch attempt of escaping by possessing Izuku's body before he was turned into stone and losing power and getting sucked in by the boy. It ended with a brief scene of his redemption. He looked at the boy, who was beyond flabbergasted, and asked, "So what do you think?" The boy looked at him, and screamed, "You tried to take over my body." The creature shrugged as he said, "Hey, when comes to shove, you do what you got to do. It wasn't anything personal, it was just business." The boy then said, "If this was supposed to make me feel better, then USCK at this." It then hit the boy as he yelled, crawling backward, "You're a villain." The chaos spirit then shook his head as he said, "Ex-villain to be more precise." The boy then calmed down as he said, "That's good." Discord didn't like that look as he said to the boy, "Don't look at me like that. Everyone has a rebellious phase, and I overcame mine. Plus, I don't have my powers anymore, you do." The boy's sweat dropped as he said, "I don't think a rebellious phase includes taking over a kingdom and ruling over them." He stopped for a bit before asking, "And what do you mean by I got your powers?" The chaos spirit then slapped him upside the head as she said, "Didn't watch the video? It's clearly shown that you sucked in my power. So I can do everything you can do?" the boy asked with stars in his eyes. The ex-lord then said while moving his hand, "Not exactly, you only reach 50% or 80% of my power." "Huh, why?" "Because you're not like me. Look at me, my body is the representation of chaos while yours is normal. I guess if you take it all in you might explode to bits and pieces." He said as Izuku had a mental image of him exploding. The boy then rubbed his body as he asked, "So aside from accidentally becoming confetti, what kind of powers do I have?" The spirit then smiled as he summoned a list and began counting, "Your powers as follows: omnipotence, chaos magic, reality restoration, size shifting, shape shifting, gesturify, logic manipulation, telekinesis, hypnotic magic, telepathy, teleportation, creation, flight, replication, animation, appendage generation, anatomical liberation, object possession, transmogrification, matter ingestion, pyrokinesis, and thought generation, among many other powers, but seriously wait for a while before you start using the first 3, okay?" Hearing no response, he looked at the boy, who had his jaw hit the ground from shock. He then went and tapped on his skull, opening it as he said, "Hello, anyone home?" He then shut the skull, causing the boy to snap back to reality. The boy then shook his head as he said, "I'm sorry, but that's a lot to take in. I have that many powers." The chaos spirit nodded his head, and said, "And many more." He then threw confetti in the air as he said, "And I'll be your coach to train you in your powers, so get ready because it's going to be a laugh and a half." He finished as he laughed with the lighting in the background. The boy then asked, "Is lighting manipulation among my powers?" The chaos spirit nodded his head as he said, "Tomorrow, we start something simple like telekinesis or flight." He then stopped for a little bit, then he said, "You know what, let me think of something else. But I have training with All Might." He was then smacked upside the head as Discord said, "Let me finish, I'll train you with him. While he focuses on the physical, I'll focus on the practical part." Okay, stop smacking me upside the head," the boy said as he pouted. He then added, "It hurts, you know." The ex-lord of chaos then smiled as he said, "Good, it's supposed to hurt." He then summoned a chair while putting Izuku in it, "Now sit, so I can explain how you access the powers of chaos. There are rules to access them, Izuku asked confused. He didn't think chaos would be so picky or have rules. It is chaos after all, it kinda beats the entire point of being the Lord of Chaos if you follow the rules. The creature then said, it's more how to power up yourself. You know, like how some quirks require some power up or at least something to juice it, or some support item to make work perfectly. Your powers, at least for now, are like that. Discord knew that the boy was different from him to start with. He wasn't a being of chaos like Discord, so he can't naturally generate chaos, so the best way to have it is by absorbing it from nature. Okay, so it's like how the turbo hero needs orange juice to fuel up his speed, Izuku said, trying to get a clear idea of how his chaos powers worked in the first place. Discord then shrugged as he said, close enough. Discord then summoned a board, and was now dressed in a teacher's uniform as he began explaining the concept of chaos. Listen, boy, chaos is wherever something out of order happens. It could be on a planetary scale, universal scale, heck even on a multiversal scale, or something as small as an individual scale. The boy then began to write everything in a small notebook he summoned, but this caused Discord to laugh as he said, you know you won't be able to take them with you to the real world, right? This made a huge cloud of depression appear over Izuku's head over the thought of his precious notes being lost, while Discord sighed, we'll figure something out about this. He then yelled, now focus. The boy then focused again, as Discord continued to explain, for you, a beginner in chaos, to actually use the powers it comes with, especially the reality-bending ones, you must absorb the energy into your body, and learn how to regulate it, or else it will probably lead for you to go nuts or crazy. The boy then cringed as he said, seems kind of bad thing going crazy in it. Discord then said, you think? Of course, it is. Imagine someone with reality-bending powers going nuts on power. It will be horrifying, to say the least, but with proper training, you will eventually become good at it, not like me, but good enough. Yeah, I wanted to ask, why can't I be good as you? Izuku asked, intrigued about this particular point. One thing, Discord said as he pointed at his body, my boy, as I said previously, is a representation of chaos itself, so I was born to handle it. You, on the other hand, your body is normal, if you as so much try to use 100% of your powers. It will lead for you to be overloaded, and go either boom or lacko. He then looked at the boy as he asked, you get it now? The boy nodded his head, as he registered how strong it is to control chaos. So how do I harvest chaos to use it? The boy wanted to know this since this was the one that intrigued him the most. How will he be able to harvest chaos to use it? It is like the sludge incident. Or is it something else? Discord then whistled saying, can you let me explain before you go off on a tangent? The boy smiled sheepishly as he apologized before Discord continued, now, you have seen how to harvest chaos firsthand. Discord said and used a flashback to the sludge scene where Izuku sees some weird waves in the ether before grabbing onto them and using them to save Kaken. It's a rather simple process in which you feel the chaos, and drew it near you for you to use. Okay, the boy nodded and then asked, but then how do I find chaos? Well, you're not going to like this part, but sorry, it's part of life, and it can't be helped. He then brought a list and began, chaos can be found in the following places which are, but are not limited to, murders, wars, hunger, famine, dehydration, torture. He continued with the list with a look of horror etched onto Izuku's face, so he concluded, in other words, wherever there's a crime you can feel it, and absorb the chaos from it. Let me process this. Izuku said as he slumped in his seat as Discord said, take your time, it must be strong to take in given you want to be a hero. Izuku then gave him a no sht, Sherlock look that spoke for its own on the amount of anger and disbelief Izuku was going through. He then looked at Discord hoping for a solution and asked, are you sure there is no other way for a power-up? Sorry, but that's the only way chaos can be obtained. It's not an ideal way, but it's the only way. Discord said as Izuku slumped even further into his chair. The boy then began grumbling as he said, "Wonderful, just wonderful. The day I get power, I get to learn that this power is apparently fueled by the pain and suffering of others. Could this get any worse? Well, you could have used your own pain to manifest earlier, but you didn't know how, so yeah." Discord said calmly as Izuku tried not to blow. "Anything else?" Izuku asked. "Not really, but don't such a sour cake. Ink all about the good you can do with my powers." Discord said, trying to cheer up the boy, "or else this won't work a bit. How am I supposed to be happy, if my powers literally use others' misery as fuel?" the boy said in a sad tone, as he never accepted to be the cause of suffering for people. After this, will he be able to become a pro? Will he be accepted by society with his powers that basically need suffering to work right? It was all mind-numbing. Discord, having enough of the endless banter, summoned a powerful water hose and activated it on Izuku, snapping him from his muttering spree. The boy then asked, "Must you do this every single time?" The creature nodded his head as he said, "Every time you do this, accept this type of punishment, because no one wants a hero with a big fat blabbermouth." This caused the boy to blush with embarrassment as he noticed that Discord was right about this. The Lord then said, "Listen, I know that you might not like the way that things are going, but this is the way the world works. If you want to change it, then go ahead, I ain't stopping you from doing that, but just remember that life is cruel and you can't change everything." The boy sighed as he took Discord's words to his heart. He then asked the Spirit of Chaos, "So what are we going to train in tomorrow from one of my powers? Is it telepathy, summoning? Or is it telekinesis?" The boy continued to mutter as Discord hosed him again, and the spirit spoke, "None." The boy was shocked as he asked, "What? Why?" Discord then said, "For the next month, you're only training in absorbing chaos from the world around till you can do it on a moment's notice." The boy tried to argue, but the chaos spirit didn't allow him as he said, "No arguments." The boy then sighed as Discord sat beside him, and said, "You know, you should really relax now." He then looked at his watch and said, "Well, seems my time is up. Don't forget not to push yourself too strong today." "What do you mean?" was all Izuku can ask before he was jolted awake by the alarm. He looked at it, and it was 5:30 in the morning. The boy then screamed, "Oh no, I'm about to be late." So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 2. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Demon Heart 12 on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.